Why do my photos feel so boring? You know the feeling, right? Your favorite photographer can even make the most miserable days look interesting. But when you go out, your photos just feel boring. That used to happen to me as well. And for the longest time, I thought I wasn't creative enough. Or maybe that I just lived in a boring city. But over the last 5 years as a photographer, I've learned that the problem isn't your talent or your location, and it also isn't your composition. Most of the time, it's just that you're missing a simple but important step that you need to take before you even go out to take photos. So, I'm going to show you what that is to help you take more interesting photos. And if you stick around till the end, I'll show you exactly how to make sure you never run out of ideas to shoot, no matter where you live. But before we get to that, we need to talk about why your photos feel boring. Because let's be honest, how many times have you thought, I want to take some nice photos today, only to realize that you have absolutely no idea what to take photos of? And then when you still decide to go out, you end up with photos that feel just kind of boring. And the thing is, your photos aren't boring because of your composition or your location. They are mostly boring because you're shooting random stuff that you don't really care about. And to fix that, firstly, think back to when you started photography. Why did you even feel excited when you took photos of even the most mundane things? Probably because something about it looked interesting to you. And that thing that makes stuff look interesting to you is your anchor. And I made an entire video about what anchors are and how you can use them that I'll link in the description. But essentially, an anchor is something that looks so interesting to you that you have to take a photo of it. And that could be when the light falls just right, or when you find matching colors, or just an interesting composition. And I explore the entire idea much deeper in the other video, but for now, let's just say that your anchor is kind of your compass to find things that look interesting to you, even if they're mundane, everyday things. So, the solution to taking more interesting photos is to make that anchor your theme and take photos around that theme. For example, you could focus on capturing interactions between people and their environment, or on finding creative frames in a city, or on playing with light and shadow. The list goes on, but whenever I shoot around a theme that excites me for a day, I find it way easier to get photos that I'm really happy with. But the thing is, knowing what your anchors are is only going to get you so far, because over time it'll get harder and harder for you to find places to shoot for your theme, because at some point you'll have shot everything in your neighborhood a dozen times. So, how do you find interesting things to take photos of after the initial spark of excitement is gone? Well, I'll tell you what you don't need, and that is a new camera. And you also don't need to travel to exotic locations. All you need to do is find inspiration. So, I'm going to tell you how to find inspiration the right way because most people have two very unhealthy ideas when it comes to inspiration. Either they think that inspiration is something magical that just hits us out of nowhere if we're just patient enough, or they think they can find it anytime they want if they just open Instagram. But let's be honest, most of the time we end up doom scrolling if we do that. And both ideas couldn't be more harmful for your creativity because inspiration isn't something that just comes to you. You do have to do the work to find it. But the good thing is, it's not that difficult if you know how to do it. Because in reality, inspiration is a cycle that consists of 3 steps. And if you follow all 3 of these, you will end up with more interesting photos. So, step 1 is to gather input. That is about finding stuff that inspires you. But there's one crucial mistake that you have to avoid here, and that is to copy anything that you see just because it gets a lot of attention online. Because whatever you consume in terms of art is going to rub off on you. And I mean, think about it like this. If you want to be a cinematographer like Christopher Nolan, but you only watch movies like The Fast and the Furious, that is not going to help you achieve your goal. And I'm not saying you can enjoy these movies, but if you're looking for inspiration to develop your style, you have to curate what you're consuming. So, to find quality input, actively look for photographers that inspire you. Look at the photos on their website, search for them on Pinterest, or go to photography exhibitions. Or if you want to use Instagram, don't scroll your attention grabbing, soul sucking feed, but instead go to the profile of your favorite photographer and look for inspiration on their feed. And if you see something you like, give it a like to support, you know? And speaking of support, why don't you subscribe to support me? Anyway, back to our example. When you see something you like, screenshot that and save it in a place with different folders so you can categorize it by theme. I use Pinterest, for example, and I've created a billion boards for different themes. Because this way you don't always risk having your attention hijacked whenever you're looking for inspiration. Okay, so this is great, but before you get to go out and take amazing photos with your inspiration in mind, there's still one crucial step that you can't ignore, and that is analyzing what exactly it is that is inspiring you in these photos. And you need to do that if you don't want to end up with an exact copy of someone else's photo and instead express your own ideas and feelings in your photography. And that isn't to say that you cannot ever take the same photo someone else has, because sometimes that is legit, and I'm gonna explain why in a minute. But analyzing photos is one of the most valuable skills that you can learn as a photographer, because that is almost like having the photographer who took the photo teach you, just that you can do it by yourself. So, when you're analyzing photos, think back to our idea of an anchor, so the thing that makes a moment look interesting to you. And then ask yourself, why did the photographer use a certain technique? And that could be the use of light or the use of a certain visual pattern. And once you figured out what makes that image so good, you can copy that technique and only that technique and apply it to your own photo. And that way, you're not copying the whole photo, you're just copying the method behind it. So, the entire idea of finding inspiration is to prepare yourself to find interesting photos once you do go out to shoot, because that is step 3 of the inspiration cycle. So, after you've gathered some inspiring photos and you found your theme, taking action is fairly easy. But there's still one challenge left that we haven't talked about yet. How do you use that inspiration without feeling like you're stealing someone else's idea? And how do you instead use that inspiration to create your own version? Well, that's where the concept of stealing like an artist comes in. And don't worry, stealing like an artist doesn't mean actually stealing someone's photo. The idea behind that phrase is to reverse engineer the thinking behind a photo. And there's 3 levels to learn how to steal like an artist. Because before you steal like an artist, you have to learn how to think like an artist. That is why level 1 is about copying. So you see a photo you love and you try to recreate it as closely as possible. Same composition, same type of subject, same light, same everything. You're not yet asking yourself why someone took the photo with a certain composition or a certain technique. You're just trying to recreate it as closely as possible because the photo that inspired you is your definition of a good photo. And copying is not inherently bad. Think of it more like learning a language. So, as a beginner, you start by repeating the exact phrases from your textbook. And you don't understand every grammar rule just yet, and you can only repeat what you just read from your book. And over time, the more you read and practice, the more freely you can express yourself. But in the beginning, you have to stick to what you see. So you have to allow yourself to learn that way not only in spoken language, but in visual language as well. And in my opinion, this is not stealing as long as you don't pretend that you just came up with this by yourself. Because if you think about it, there is no kind of photo that you can take on planet Earth that hasn't been taken before. And there are, of course, limitations to this argument, especially for commercial photography, but for the sake of learning, as a not so experienced photographer, I think this is fine. Because the thing is, only if you apply these techniques yourself, you learn how to use them and how to express your own feelings and ideas. And after a while, they will become part of your creative muscle memory. And that's when you move to level 2, where you slowly begin to steal like an artist. Alright, once you've spent some time mimicking for practice, you'll probably learn about things like composition, different photography techniques, and how important light is. And on level 2, you're able to analyze each of these components and you're starting to understand how they impact the feeling of your photo. So at this point, you're no longer just copying an entire image, and instead you copy one specific element of a photo. So for example, this photo by Van Ho really inspired me. And the contrast between the light and the shadow, the contrast between the subject and the background, and the use of shadows as negative space to hide distractions is just chef's kiss. But because I don't live in the Hong Kong of 1962, I can't recreate this exact photo. But what I can do is recreate the visual pattern he used, like contrast and negative space. So I ended up with this shot, which is by no means as amazing as Fun House, but it also doesn't have to be. My goal with this photo was just to use the light in a similar way that he did, because that was my anchor for this shot. That was what made this photo so amazing to me. And to be clear, it's not like I saw Fanho's photo, went out the same day and took my shot. It's just that I saw his photo, saved it on my board on Pinterest, and at some point after I saw his photo, I found the location for my photo and I realized that this was my chance to recreate his composition to some degree. Alright, the last level of stealing like an artist is where you start to develop your own style. And at this point, your work is less about copying anyone and is becoming more of a blend of the things that you consume. So, again, curate the inspiration that you feed yourself. And to achieve that, study photographers that you love. So look very closely at their composition, the visual patterns they use, and how they work with light. And by taking small pieces from different artists, you'll slowly build a library of techniques that you can use whenever you need them. And over time, you'll naturally start combining them in your own way. Also, huge disclaimer, if you ever take photos that you feel like aren't on the level you'd like to be on, don't be discouraged, because I think 99% of photographers take photos that would fit on each of these levels on any given day. At least that's the case for me. So, for example, when I went to Japan last year, I definitely took some photos that were on level 1, where I copied photos that I loved. For example, this panning shot at Shibuya Crossing has been done a billion times. But I don't care, because I think that's an awesome shot. And I wanted to have my own version of it, so I made it. But over the years, I've also taken photos that feel more personal and unique, simply because I found so much inspiration and applied everything I know about composition that I came up with these by myself. So, to summarize all this, your photos aren't boring because you're a bad photographer. They're boring because you are bored and you don't know what to shoot. So, to find out what you want to shoot, find an anchor. That is something that looks so interesting to you that you want to take a photo of it. And that could be light, or a beautiful color, or a cool composition that you'd like to try out, an interesting subject, or a feeling that you want to express. And make that anchor your theme. So try to only shoot around that for a day. And to make sure you don't run out of ideas for how to shoot that anchor, find inspiration. For example, by going to art exhibitions, by looking at what your favorite photographers created, or searching on Pinterest. And then, of course, save that inspiration and categorize it by theme. Then, and this is crucial, analyze what makes the photos that inspire you so good. Think about why the photographer shot the photo in the way that they did. And if you do this for long enough, you'll naturally go from copying photos you love to creating photos that express your own ideas and your feelings. And if you want to learn how different composition techniques help you express those ideas, watch this video next.